Welcome to another episode of iPodcast That 2.0. My name is Brian, and I am your host for the day. Today, we are going to talk about a podcast budget or a podcaster's budget. And I'm going to back up like I often do. In the world I come from, if you cannot measure it, you should not be doing it. i.e., how do you measure the success of your Instagram feed? We have analytics. We can look at how one post did compared to another post. And those analytics, when analyzed, will show trends. And people like it when I post when I'm outside versus indoor posts. So maybe I start producing more outside content and see how that affects the overall growth. So A, we have a task. In this case, we're going to start a podcast. B, how are we going to measure it? We have analytics. C, let's move forward. But you have to go back and look at those analytics from time to time and compare shows against other shows. Compare, am I posting consistently, same day, same time? If I post early or late, how does that affect listenership for that episode? We need to look at these numbers to measure and determine whether we are successful or not. So how does that relate to a podcast budget? Well, budget is another means of how successful is this podcast. So if you've never created a budget before or just want a cheat sheet, open up Excel, search for a new template called budget. You can even use a basic check register budget, but we have to track a couple of things. How much money are we spending to produce the podcast? And on another column, I like to track time. How much time are we devoting to creating this content? Once you start creating content and you've got 2 or 3 months under your belt, you can go back and what you're going to see is, A, I'm spending less money because I made some big purchases up front, i.e. mic, mixer, etc. But I'm spending money monthly hosting, things of that nature. But we're going to see the amount of time we spend creating content decrease because we're getting more comfortable with the process and or the workflow. So those are two good things to track. Now, say you're using a podcast to generate a lead and you close 1 out of 4 leads, and that one that you close is worth $600 a year. So the amount of time and money you're investing in creating this podcast content versus the return on lead conversion will tell you whether it's successful or not. Now, there's a few factors there. Your funnel, how well defined is your sales funnel? Are you making it easy for your listeners to get into your sales funnel? What are you doing to entice them to get into your sales funnel? And then this part is you, skill as the salesman or the sales team or the marketing team. How effective are they at moving people through this funnel to close? If you can take that 1 of 4 closing to 2 of 4, then you might have made that tweak and the podcast content is going to be that much more valuable because the return is twice what it was last time. But you need to measure, especially if you're doing this for business, unless it's merely brand recognition. We work on a few shows that are brand recognition. They do not advertise the products that they sell. They don't really talk about the products that they sell. They're putting this content out there for brand awareness, which is awesome. They've got the budget to do it, and they're just worried about show growth. That way they can share their brand message to more people. But we can grab an easy template from Excel. I'm sure there's templates for Google Sheets if you're a Google user, but that's a good way to start measuring time and money that you're spending producing a podcast. There's a second component of that. If you have budget to promote your podcast, you can run ads on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google, Microsoft, and bring more eyes to your show. But then that ad spend needs to be added to your cost of production. And then you'll get the conversion analytics for that ad. 1,000 people saw it, 100 click, 20 subscribed, or 20 gave you an email address or whatnot. So you can measure the success of that. And this one piece of content we actually discussed last night in the meetup that we had, or 2 nights ago in the meetup that we had. Equipment. A lot of people say, hey, I want to start a podcast. They run to Best Buy or jump on Amazon and they buy a USB mic to plug into their computer, which is cool. You're going to spend $120. But now you want to interview somebody. Well, you can't plug 2 USB mics into, one computer right now. So now you need to buy 2 mics with XLR cables and an audio interface or a device to record multi-track, multiple mics into one file, or multiple files, but multiple separate tracks. So think long-term. Instead of buying the $120 mic and then having to buy 2 $120 mics, if I would have bought one USB/XLR mic to begin with, then I have the bright idea. I want to start interviewing people. I just buy a second one of those. Now I have 2 mics for my show instead of 3, and one you can't even use with an audio interface. So we spend a lot of time with people that want to produce their show on their own and not utilize the studio about what type of equipment to buy and what types of things to think about. A lot of people go out, I'm going to do an interview show, and they buy a 2-input XLR audio interface. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, they come to, yeah, we would love to be on your show. Now you need 3. So maybe buying a little bit larger audio interface out of the gate would allow growth without having to reinvest in new equipment. So think long-term, think of growth, think of expansion when you're purchasing. And as you track those expenses, you overall will spend less money, number one. Number two, if you decide podcasting is not for you, you've got some decent equipment to sell to the next person. Obviously, you're not going to get full market value. Who knows? You might. But, you've got the resale value on that. And just think long term. I mean, we started off with a USB mic, quickly grew into a mixer. Oh, and then we need to introduce cells. So we've got to go buy extra hardware and extra cables to run a mix minus off of a cell phone into the mixer. So there's all kinds of things to think about. And with this having been said, I'd like you to go to sitchradio.com. Under contact us, there's a consultation link. You can click on that and get 20 minutes of my time, and I can kind of talk you through some of the do's and don'ts based off what you're describing you're going to do with your show. So that is something I encourage you to do. The link will be in the show note as well. So sitchradio.com, contact us, consultation, no cost to you. We'd love to work you through some of these problems. So again, to wrap up, when it comes to budgeting, or anything that you're going to do related to your podcast, track it. Track the success of your social posts. Track the success of each episode. Track how much money you're spending. Track how much time you're spending. That way you can get a true evaluation of what this podcast is either costing you and or earning you if you're doing it well. That's it for today. You guys have a great weekend. We will see you Monday.